Hey everyone, I'm Abby McConnell, owner of Legacy Events, and today I have with me Bonnie Silba from Fudge's Flowers and Gifts, located in Jefferson, Iowa. And today we are going to talk about bouquets and boutonnieres for your fall themed weddings. So, Bonnie, I know a lot of people, which you probably know too, have an idea of colors and vibes that they want for their wedding, but when it comes to flowers, they might get a little stuck or not know where to go or what flowers to pick. Do you have any advice for them?
I do, and thanks for having me. This is so fun. Yeah, I think sometimes when a bride or their family comes in, sometimes it can be hard to narrow it down, and they think they have to know the exact flowers they want or the exact colors. And so my advice is always to try to pick a little bit of your theme. Picking your bridesmaids dresses, that's helpful. Picking what your grooms or your groomsmen are going to wear, because sometimes it goes from, oh, they're going to wear tuxes to, oh, they're going to wear jeans and a button-down shirt. And so that can help kind of send the vibe of what kind of style of wedding we might need to start leaning them to. You also start to hear words like, I want it natural, I want it to be kind of country, I want it to be maybe elegant or even glitter. Sometimes that word comes into it. And so you start to feed a little bit on what kind of vibe of a wedding they're going to want to have.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say is the process? So a couple gets engaged, a couple first things they pick are venue, date, obviously, when that's going to be. And then next thing is really flowers. It's really, what's my vibe going to look like? Start talking about decor, and in that decor becomes florals and what that looks like, not only just for a bouquet or a boutonniere, but also how do I incorporate florals into my wedding? So what do you find is the process when someone comes to you?
Yeah, well, a lot of times when we get an engaged couple, it's already a couple that we have had as a customer. So it's usually somebody that we've already helped in another way, celebrate a birthday, maybe you helped with a grandparent's funeral. Some of those types of things, other life events have led them to us. Sometimes it's referrals, sometimes it's just, my wedding's in Jefferson and I don't know anybody in Jefferson, can you help me?
Sure.
And so when they come in, if once they get engaged, it's good to, once you have the date, at least give us a call and say, hey, I'm thinking my wedding's going to be in 10 months. We don't need to plan flowers that far ahead, but it is good to just secure the date so we don't overbook ourselves, and we make sure that we have that for you. And then once they have that, they pick out their bridesmaids dresses. And I have had bridesmaids dresses change. So we don't want to plan too far out, because maybe something has, an order hasn't gotten in when it was supposed to.
Sure.
So once those bridesmaids dresses are in hand and we know the color there, then we start to pick out what your scheme is. And I am very big on lots of texture, lots of different color, but not making it look like we couldn't make a decision. And so I brought some examples today.
Yeah, I see
of
that
some
in
of
there.
our things.
Beautiful. So tell us a little bit about what goes into picking. Let's kind of talk about a bouquet specifically. So I know you have a lot of different things here on the counter. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yep. So in my head, for this this fake wedding that we made up for this video for today, in my head that this bride has got maybe a burnt orange type of bridesmaid's dress, and so we're going to tie in a little bit of that. Yes, definitely has been popular. So first we start with maybe a filler or some sort of a texture in there that kind of is similar to the color of the dress. So we want to make sure and tie that in. You don't want a bouquet that's the same color, because then it blends in and all the photos look too much alike. So that's where I call this a monochromatic type scheme. So this bride has some of a, didn't want a ton of different colors, but wanted it to look fall. So we picked some fall foliage. This is just a solidago that you see in Iowa. It actually grows here. And then you have to pick kind of your focal flower. And most brides don't come in and say, I really want a cremone. They don't even know what that is. Well, that's where we come in and say, we've got some really cool focal flowers that will match what you're doing. So here we've got that. And then sometimes you have maybe a mom or somebody that's involved in the wedding planning that says, I just love roses. And maybe your bride isn't that specific, and so it's like, we could throw in a few roses. So then you find a color scheme that matches. So we really love to do something like that. And then my favorite part of the wedding flowers is the greenery. And it always is. I don't know how to explain it. But in my bouquets, I would say we always use 4 to 10 different types of greenery. And people would be surprised to hear that. So we throw in some lighter tones. We even throw in some eucalyptus, which is very, very popular. Most people don't know that there are dozens of different types of eucalyptus, and we'll use 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5 depending on the wedding. And then your greeneries. So when you're talking a fall wedding, you want to incorporate some of that natural element, things that you're used to seeing in the area of your wedding for fall. So what we did here was some cedar. And people think of cedar as a winter green, but if you feel the texture of it, it really does bring in a nice fall. Yeah, and it brings a nice smell.
yeah.
So some people say, I don't like the smell of eucalyptus. We could use one that doesn't have much of an odor and then still pull in some smell. So that's always fun. And then I like to use something that maybe not everybody's used to, or that brings a little bit of a funkiness or a little bit of a texture to it that's kind of cool. So these are just different hypericum berries that we'll sometimes mix in too. And I think the thing for couples, families, brides to remember is they don't have to know the name of one thing. That's what the experts are here for. That's why you come to professionals to plan your wedding, to help with your flowers, so you don't get overwhelmed with all of the decisions that have to be made.
And think of how many flowers are out there and how many greeneries, and putting that all together, you know, there's a look that a lot of people are going for when they probably come to you. And it's how do you take that look and incorporate it into something like this, and that's you can look at a picture and say that's this flower, and I can get that for you.
And then they try to do DIY. Sometimes we'll see a bride try to do DIY thinking that they'll save money, and sometimes you can, but a lot of times you can't, because if you want the variety and look that you really, really want, you end up spending a lot more trying to accomplish that on your own than you would if you let us get it in, when we can use those other things on other arrangements for you, or reuse some of the same things. So it helps the bride, I think, to know that they don't have to do it alone. They don't have to worry about the stress. And most weddings we do deliver. So then your flowers just show up when you're getting your hair done and they're ready for photos. So it really takes the ease off.
Well, and it's very important to keep your flowers cool before your wedding day. Make sure that they stay longer and they look really nice that day. So if you are traveling for somewhere for your wedding and you're using a floralist that is local, or you have connections with someone and you work with them, a lot of times you may know someone in the area or can come up with a solution to store those flowers overnight. So
and
they can still use someone local that they want, and actually use that as a benefit to them.
Exactly. And when we have to travel, because we travel, we've traveled up to about 3 hours away, but in general we stay within a 60-mile radius. We just have an early morning. So then we know first thing when they leave that those flowers look pristine, and they're going to look the same when your photographer's taking photos. And then a lot of people reuse them in the reception as decoration. And so then we know that they'll still look good by the evening time. So it's the best way to get the most out of your flowers.
Yes. And speaking of that, so here we have some flowers that you would put into a bouquet. How would you incorporate them into other flowers that they may need, such as like arrangements for a reception, or other people that are in the wedding? What are those typical flower combos, or who do they get them for?
Sure. So it kind of scales to, I kind of categorize into 4 different sizes of weddings. And I call the first one the intimate wedding. Maybe it's just the couple, or maybe it's just the couple and their witnesses. And so for that, we're looking at a boutonniere, maybe a boutonniere for the witness if they're going to take some photos, and then a corsage maybe, or a handheld for the witness or bridesmaid, excuse me. And so you kind of grow from there. The next one, you kind of maybe are looking at, you have maybe one attendant with you, and then you have moms involved. Well, then maybe the next one you're looking at 3 to 5 bridesmaids. And so we just customize. We kind of have some ideas and help people try to figure out what their budget maybe needs to be. Because the one thing I figured out is people have no idea what flowers cost for a wedding. They don't know what they cost for most life events. And so we now have a document that we can give to them that says, hey, here's kind of the overview, but know that your wedding isn't going to look exactly like this, because everybody's wedding is different and customized to you. So I always tell people, who are you going to have in the photos? If you're going to have grandma and grandpa on both sides, if you get them for one side, you get them for the other. And you never start any problems with flowers. It's just kind of an even way to go, even way to handle it. And sometimes it's the readers. Sometimes it's your person marrying you. Maybe someone's playing the piano or singing. So it's up to you how far out you go with flowers. But very common to do flowers for somebody other than just the bride.
Okay, perfect. Yes, and we, again, love how you said, here's kind of a layout of what it it may cost and what you're going for, but every wedding is so unique and so customizable that it is hard to just say this is what it's going to be, because a rose is a different cost than greenery. And if you're into a more natural look that has more of that greenery, your price of your bouquet or other florals in your wedding may be altered significantly, you know. So that, I love that, because that's something that we always strive to tell everybody too, is your wedding is so unique and customizable. Make it your own. It's not going to be like anyone else's. So let us help you kind of figure out what you want and bring that to the table. So
that's just another reason to hire professionals for event planning, for all of it. So then you don't have to worry. I think that's the number one thing.
Yes.
Don't add stress to what could be an already stressful day.
Right. Yes.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely want to make it enjoyable. We always say even the planning part can be enjoyable. The whole aspect from getting engaged to your wedding day and thereafter. So, okay, cool. Well, why don't you show us kind of how do you incorporate these flowers into a bouquet? How does that kind of come together and give a little behind the scenes look?
You kind of start with, if you know you're going to have a variety, you want to start using that variety right away. And so when you're doing that, sometimes I just got to cut them shorter, because that's going to be, I start with in the middle, kind of a mix of greenery. Now, honestly, today it's harder for me because I always do it in a mirror. I'm looking at a mirror as I'm doing it, so you guys will see and you can let me know if I did a good job or not. But now a lot of times I will take this greenery off because it can make your bouquet bunchy and you don't want it to get too heavy. You'd be surprised how heavy bouquets can end up. And how wide they can be to fit around your hand. So that's all things you want to keep in mind. Because you end up holding this for a few hours the day of your wedding. And
and pictures. Oh man.
You can take pictures for a few hours if you wanted to.
Yes.
So we're looking at incorporating all the different sneak over and steal some of those.
Let me know what you need.
So you're just kind of mirroring, and it does depend on the bride. Sometimes they want, I always go to sports or fruit. So do they want a watermelon where it's long and kind of wide, and it's a bouquet. It's going to be a heavy bouquet no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Or do they want a basketball, or do they want a cantaloupe? And so I kind of gauge that size with them on how they want to do that. So, so right now I'm mixing. I'm going to cut these short so our camera up above can see too some of the different. Now when I'm doing, it does make a difference how tall or how short your bride is, and so you have to keep that in mind when you're doing these too. And that's just something that professionals would know.
I was going to say something I would have never thought about, but that makes so much sense. You can't. I mean, you wouldn't want this very long, large bouquet for a more petite.
And that just goes to the customizing of all of it. You just want to make sure you're customizing. So here you can see I'm just kind of starting a bouquet, and I've mixed all the textures. So far I have at least one of every ingredient that we're using today in here. And so then from that you just keep building around to make sure things get, and this is just me being picky here. Nobody wants to hang on to sticky stems, so you want to make sure your stems are taken care of.
Detail, that little details that make the big difference, doesn't it?
It absolutely is. So you can see this kind of starting to come together.
Beautiful.
As a bouquet, and so then you kind of just look and see where. Now this is another thing, when you're using roses, nobody wants a thorn, so you've got to make sure you're taking
one of those little details.
Yep, you don't want to poke anybody. And then there's always tips of how to hold your bouquet and certain things that you can be doing. I've seen a lot of weddings, and I think we've all been to those weddings where the boutonniere is flopped over.
Yeah, or upside down.
Upside down. So there are certain ways to pin it. There's also magnet boutonnieres. There's pocket boutonnieres. So there's some new trends starting to come around with some of those that are really, really fun. And you've seen where they're holding their bouquet like this, and that beautiful dress that they spent so much money on isn't seen. So there's certain tips of how to handle that too. So this would be just kind of a smaller bouquet, but you can see kind of where that's ending up. I can't because I don't have a mirror, but I think that looks okay. So there, that's kind of gives you an idea then.
And like you said, those burnt orange tones, I love how you incorporated it through just that added element, but it's not what the whole bouquet is, you know. Adding that in to that allows all of those color concepts to come together and really pop against the bride's dress and in those pictures.
It does, and I didn't count, but I think we have probably 7 to 10 different stems in here, and that's something you really wouldn't want to try to figure out on your own, I don't think. Now, I've never made a bouquet that fast, but I don't think that looks bad. I take a lot of more time.
I love
I take a lot of more time for you brides if you're watching and I've done your wedding. It takes me at least an hour and a half at the most.
Yes,
so that was
sure,
I'm actually really happy with that. But yeah, so that's kind of some of the insight to a wedding there.
Yes, I love it. Well, thank you so much for giving us some tips and tricks and insight into what it takes to put a bouquet together and kind of the concept of what flowers get incorporated through a variety of different aspects of the wedding and that process too. So if you are a newly engaged couple who are starting your process of finding some vendors, Bonnie at Fudge's Flowers and Gifts is in Jefferson, Iowa, and does some amazing work, both quick and when lots of detail and time goes into it. So
and I'd love to do a balloon and flower wall. We need to find a wedding
where
we get to do both.
That.
So if you're a bride out there, we will figure it out.
Backdrops are in, everybody.
They are so in. Backdrops are the funnest part. So well, thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you so much for coming. Yes, thanks. We appreciate it.
Yes.
Stay tuned for more tips and tricks from our experts.